So if you spend, any time at all on the internet, you have inevitably fallen down the rabbit hole of animal videos.
Oh, absolutely. It is completely unavoidable.
Right. But there is a really fascinating observation in the source material we are doing a deep dive into today regarding that obsession, specifically the divide between dogs and cats.
Yeah, the dog versus cat dynamic online is super interesting.
It really is, because dogs are incredibly popular online, obviously. But think about what a viral dog video usually actually is. It shows off training.
Right, like obedience.
Exactly.
Yeah.
A dog doing a complex trick or, waiting patiently for a treat with a biscuit on its nose. It is all about being fiercely obedient. Cats, however, are a completely different story.
They are the undisputed rulers of the internet,
Hmm.
and it is precisely because they are entirely unpredictable. I mean, they seemingly domesticated themselves.
Yeah, they do whatever they want.
Right. When a cat does a trick in a video, you get the distinct impression the cat just happened to decide to do it in that exact moment.
Hmm.
And it might just, wander off screen the next second to go stare at a blank wall.
Which is actually the perfect metaphor for what we are talking about today. Our mission for this deep dive is to explore the core concepts from Jaron Lanier's book, 10 Arguments for Deleting Your Social Media Accounts Right Now.
And we are going to look at the invisible forces shaping our online behavior
Mm.
and hopefully figure out how you, the listener, can reclaim your autonomy.
Exactly, because the author points out that cats have done the seemingly impossible. They have integrated themselves into the modern, high-tech world without giving up an ounce of their autonomy. No one has taken over your cat.
No algorithm controls the cat.
Right. And deep down, that is what we all long for when we log on. We want to be cats on the internet. Autonomous, roaming free, completely in charge of our own experience.
But the reality we are facing, and this is the profound societal fear that the author breaks down, is that these massive tech platforms are actually turning us into dogs.
Yeah, that is a scary thought.
It is. We are being trained day by day to respond to digital dog whistles without even realizing it. Our autonomy is just quietly being chipped away.
So to understand how we are being turned into obedient dogs, we can't
Well,
just talk about vague concepts like, screen time. We have to look at the actual training mechanisms hidden right inside your smartphone.
the literal nuts and bolts of it.
Right. The author suggests it is helpful to think of the phone not just as a communication device, but as a modern-day Skinner box.
Yeah, B.F. Skinner. For anyone who missed that particular day in Psych 101, he was the behaviorist who put pigeons in isolation cages.
The famous pigeon experiment.
Exactly. He gave them a little lever, and when they pecked it, they got a food pellet. He trained them through purely mechanical, isolated feedback loops.
And in the modern version, you are the pigeon in the experimental cage.
You are. But instead of a scientist with a clipboard watching you peck a lever, it is an algorithm. And the amount of data this algorithm is collecting is almost incomprehensible.
It is not just tracking what links you click, right?
Oh no, it is way beyond what shoes you put in a digital cart. These algorithms are tracking your baseline reading speed. They track your location patterns down to the minute.
Wow.
And if you are looking at a screen, they can actually utilize the device's hardware to track how your facial expressions change. They can even track how your skin tone shifts.
Wait, hold on. Tracking microflashes in skin tone?
Yeah.
Just through the light reflection on a standard phone camera.
Exactly, to gauge your emotional reaction to a specific post.
I mean, that is incredibly invasive, but it also raises a question for me about just sheer processing power. Like, how does an algorithm actually make sense of a billion people's reading speeds and skin tones all at the same time?
Well, the key is that it doesn't need to, understand you in a human psychological sense.
Right.
It doesn't know your hopes and dreams. It simply takes all of those micro measurements and cross-references them with the data of millions of other people in real time.
So is just looking for overlaps.
Exactly. If millions of people who share your specific reading speed, your location patterns, and your food preferences suddenly react predictably to a specific prompt, say a news headline with a subtly angrier tone, the algorithm knows that mathematically you probably will too.
It is like a statistical idiot demon.
That is a great way to put it. It just matches patterns to predict and manipulate your next move.
Okay, I want to push back on the malice of this a little bit, or at least play devil's advocate here.
Sure, go for it.
Because when I think about my smartphone, I don't necessarily feel like a pigeon in a cage. I feel like I'm carrying a slot machine in my pocket.
The infinite scroll.
Right. And we know that was intentional. Sean Parker, the first president of Facebook, he famously admitted they designed the platform to give you a, quote, little dopamine hit every once in a while.
By exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology.
Yeah, exactly. So if the algorithm is functioning like a slot machine, handing out digital candy and dopamine to keep us engaged with content we actually enjoy, is that fundamentally malicious? Or is it just, I don't know, really, really effective business?
Well, the slot machine analogy is incredibly accurate, but the dopamine loop Parker mentioned is only half the story. The major so what insight of the source material here is that social media actually operates on a carrot and stick approach.
Carrot and stick.
Yeah. You get the treats, the likes, the positive reinforcement, the funny videos, but you're also getting the equivalent of sudden electric shocks.
You mean the negative reinforcement?
Right. Social media relies heavily on negative feedback to modify your behavior. This includes senseless social rejection, being publicly ignored, or even phenomenons like catfishing.
Oh, catfishing is brutal.
It is, where someone creates a completely fake digital persona to lure you into a relationship or a scam, and it results in sudden, sharp emotional pain. The unpleasant feedback is just as sticky, if not more so, than the pleasant kind.
That makes sense.
But to address your point about the algorithm just giving us what we want, we have to look at a psychological mechanism called the allure of mystery.
The author mentions this. It is the idea that perfect feedback is actually boring to us.
Exactly.
Like, if a child gets a piece of candy every single time they say please, they eventually just stop caring about the candy. It becomes a mundane transaction.
But if the candy only comes sometimes, seemingly at random, the brain just goes into overdrive trying to crack the code.
Right. Our brains are ultimate pattern-finding machines.
They really are. When the feedback is glitchy or slightly random, we just can't resist the challenge. We keep pressing the button, hoping a deeper pattern will reveal itself. But the problem is, on social media, there is no deeper pattern.
It is just bottomless randomness injected by adaptive algorithms.
Precisely.
But wait, that makes no sense to me. Code is supposed to be perfectly logical, right? A computer program executes a set of instructions. Why would a programmer intentionally inject randomness into a system meant to track and predict our behavior?
Because the algorithm is designed to constantly make small changes to itself to get better results.
Meaning more engagement.
Right. Imagine the algorithm shows you an ad for a new coffee brand exactly 5 seconds after you watch a video about mornings, and you buy it. The algorithm might automatically test waiting 4.5 seconds next time.
Okay, testing the waters.
If you still buy, great. But what if changing it to 4.5 seconds makes you less likely to buy, and changing it to 5.5 seconds also makes you less likely?
Then the algorithm gets stuck in a rut. It assumes 5 seconds is the absolute pinnacle of human engagement based on those tiny local adjustments.
Exactly. But what if 2.5 seconds is actually the absolute best time? The algorithm can't see that because it is stuck in its little 5-second rut. So to solve this mathematical problem, programmers inject a sparser dose of greater randomness.
Just throwing things at the wall.
Yeah, it acts exactly like a random genetic mutation in natural evolution. It jars the system out of its merely okay settings, throwing wild, unpredictable stimuli at you just to see if a massive leap yields a better result.
So the algorithm is just doing basic evolutionary math to escape a statistical blind spot. But it is doing that by experimenting on a live human being.
It creates this tragic cat-and-mouse game. The algorithm is injecting meaningless, random stimuli to find the perfect parameters to manipulate your attention. Meanwhile, your brain, desperate for meaning, is trying to adapt to those random experiments.
You are adapting to a fiction.
Yes, you become hooked on an elusive mirage, and that mathematical process forces the human brain into a loop of behavioral addiction.
Okay, so if this system is so mathematically intense and frankly so miserable for the user caught in the loop, why build it this way at all? It can't just be an accident. Who is paying for the server space to run this massive psychological experiment?
Well, the author calls this economic engine the Bummer Machine.
Bummer. That is quite the acronym.
It stands for Behaviors of Users Modified and Made into an Empire for Rent.
Which perfectly captures the evolution of the internet. I mean, in the early days, an advertiser bought a banner ad. You saw it, maybe bought the soap. It was a digital billboard.
A simple transaction.
But now it has morphed into continuous Titanic-scale behavior modification. Let's break down that last part. An empire for rent. Because they aren't just selling ad space anymore, are they?
No, they are selling the guaranteed subtle shifting of your baseline behavior. And the terrifying shift here is that the platform companies often don't even know the true identities of the people renting their machine.
That is wild.
The customers aren't just soap sellers. They could be malicious state intelligence agencies trying to sway an election, or shell corporations trying to weaken a society's trust in public health. The machine is completely agnostic. It just sells behavior change to the highest bidder.
The author compares the bummer machine to climate change, actually. You can't necessarily blame one specific hurricane or one ruined family Thanksgiving argument entirely on the platform, but the machine fundamentally changes the overall odds of disaster across the whole population.
It shifts the entire climate.
Right. But here's where I get tripped up. We see tech companies constantly announcing new policy tweaks. They hire armies of moderators, they ban bad actors, they crack down on fake news syndicates. Why isn't tweaking the rules working?
It fails because the underlying financial incentives remain completely untouched. The author compares this to prohibition in the 1920s.
Oh, that is a great analogy.
When you outlaw alcohol, but the massive public demand and the financial incentives to supply it remain, you don't actually stop people from drinking. You just create organized crime.
The mob steps in.
Exactly. In the digital world, banning specific behaviors while keeping the exact same business model, where the ultimate goal is owning attention at all costs, it just forces bad actors to evolve. It creates highly technical, underground cyber mafias.
Meaning they just build better botnets. They figure out how to evade the new filters because the financial reward for manipulating people is just too hard to walk away from.
And there's a deep biological reason why this ecosystem naturally favors the absolute worst actors. Bummer operates on what we can call bargain feedback.
Bargain feedback.
Yeah. Negative emotions like fear and anger are biologically cheaper and much faster to evoke than positive emotions. It takes a long time, sometimes years, to build genuine trust with someone, but you can destroy that trust or trigger a state of panic in a matter of seconds.
Right. Fight or flight kicks in instantly. It's as a primal survival mechanism.
So if an algorithm is blindly optimizing for engagement and behavior change, it will naturally gravitate toward negative emotions. There is no evil genius sitting in a Silicon Valley cubicle deciding to make people sad.
It is just math.
The machine is just naturally biased downward toward degradation because making people angry or terrified is the most mathematically efficient way to maximize profit.
Okay, so we understand the mechanics, the Skinner box, and we understand the money renting the bummer machine. But let's look at the actual human cost. What happens to you, the user, when you spend hours, days, and years inside a machine that is literally optimized for negative engagement? What is the behavioral toll?
Well, it fundamentally alters your personality, often without you even noticing the shift.
The author actually shares some incredibly vulnerable personal anecdotes about this in the book. He talks about how back in the 1970s, on very early basic internet comment boards, he would suddenly find himself getting into these vicious, hours-long online fights over incredibly stupid things.
Just completely losing it over nothing.
Yeah, he vividly remembers getting furious over someone's opinion on piano brands.
He describes it as a storm of chaotic human weather rolling in out of nowhere.
And he experienced it again years later when he was a top-tier blogger for the Huffington Post. He said reading the comments section gave him this low-level, boiling rage.
It is infectious.
It got to the point where he found himself wanting to write inflammatory things he didn't even believe in real life, just to get a reaction out of people.
This brings us to a fascinating, albeit dark, concept in addiction psychology that the author refers to as sooty snow.
Sooty snow.
Think about the first snowfall of winter. It is beautiful, pristine, and exciting. That was the early internet. But by February, that snow is just black, icy sludge on the side of the road, sooty snow. You don't enjoy it anymore, but you still have to trudge through it.
It is just a mess.
As addiction progresses, addicts often begin to actually seek out suffering. A gambler isn't addicted to the joy of winning. Their brain becomes addicted to the vertiginous swing between the extreme highs and the crushing lows.
So a bummer addict wading through that sooty snow becomes preternaturally quick to take offense.
Yes, they almost hope to get into a spat, just to scratch that digital itch and feel the cycle complete itself.
Now, the author uses a really recognizable behavioral case study here, Donald Trump. And just to frame this free listening, this isn't about partisan politics or endorsing a specific worldview at all.
Not at all.
We are not taking any sides here. The author is looking at this strictly through the lens of platform mechanics, just how dopamine loops fundamentally alter a personality, regardless of who you are, what side of the aisle you are on, or what office you hold.
The observation is purely behavioral. The author notes that he actually met Donald Trump decades ago, describing him back in the 80s and 90s as a very self-aware New York character.
Someone who was largely in on his own joke.
A master at working the room.
Yeah.
But the author observes that as Trump became a heavy, daily Twitter user, his behavior changed to fit this snowflake pattern.
He became highly reactive.
Right, engaging in petty spats, and sometimes seeming to lose control to the addiction of the platform itself. The point the author is making is a universal warning. No matter how powerful you are, the addiction mechanics of the bummer machine can overpower your baseline personality.
It is a really sobering thought, but it raises a practical dilemma for the rest of us. Like, if I recognize this happening, and I actively don't want to become an internet troll seeking out arguments in the sooty snow, what are my options? Am I just forced to be fake nice?
Walking on eggshells.
Yeah, terrified of saying the wrong thing? Just posting heavily curated photos of my brunch so nobody yells at me?
It feels like a trap, because humans have a primal vulnerability to social pressure. We are born helpless. Our survival has historically depended on what the tribe thinks of us.
So social anxiety isn't a modern weakness. It is a profound evolutionary survival emotion.
Exactly. And the bummer machine weaponizes it.
This is what the author calls component A of bummer attention acquisition, leading to asshole supremacy.
Because ordinary people are put into an environment where the only available reward is attention. Not money, not real power, just eyes-on-you mind games become the dominant currency.
And who gets the most attention in a system mathematically optimized for negative emotion?
The biggest jerks.
The trolls.
Asshole supremacy becomes the absolute rule of the land. It strips away the capacity for authentic human connection. You are left with exactly the choice you mentioned. Become a troll to survive the combat, or retreat into a hyper-curated, fake, nice version of yourself.
Both options rob you of your actual free will.
Completely.
So if this entire ecosystem is fundamentally rigged to make us addicted, angry, and fake, what is the practical path forward? How do we actually escape? This brings us to the author's 2018 call to action, which is right there in the title of the book, Deleting Your Accounts.
He frames this using a very grounded historical analogy, lead paint.
Wait, lead paint? That feels like a massive leap. A toxic chemical physically poisons your body and causes brain damage. Social media just makes me a little annoyed at my uncle's political posts. How are those the same?
Well, because social media poisons the social well. It causes societal brain damage. When society realized that lead paint was toxic, we didn't declare that houses should never be painted again.
Right, we didn't burn down the paint factories or ban architecture.
We simply stopped buying the toxic paint until a safe, lead-free version was invented. The author argues that social media is exactly the same. We don't have to throw away the internet or smash our smartphones.
We just need to stop using the toxic, bummer-driven version of it until a safe, non-manipulative alternative is forced into the market.
Exactly. Just pause the consumption.
Okay, but let's look at the reality of modern life for a second. If I delete my accounts today, aren't I just isolating myself? There is this massive hurdle called the network effect.
Oh, for sure.
If everyone I know is on these platforms and I leave, I am abandoning my friends. I might lose access to professional networking on LinkedIn or conveniences like Uber or dating apps. Isn't quitting a massive privilege that not everyone can actually afford to do?
The lock-in effect is undeniably real, and it is a very valid pushback. It is effectively impossible for everyone in a society to back up their data and move to a new platform simultaneously. Interestingly, though, the author notes that this lock-in was actually a flaw built into the very foundation of the early internet.
How did they overlook something that huge?
The early internet was built on heavily libertarian ideals. The pioneers left out fundamental, centralized functions like personal identity protocols or built-in secure payment systems.
They just assumed the free market would figure it out.
They assumed independent entrepreneurs would eventually fill in the blanks. But by leaving those basic needs to the private, unregulated market, they accidentally laid the foundation for gargantuan global data monopsonies.
Okay. Monopsony?
Yeah. Think of a monopoly as a market with only one seller, like you have to buy your electricity from one company. A monopsony is the reverse. It is a market with only one dominant buyer for everything you have to offer.
Oh, I see it.
In this case, you're offering your social data, your connections, your digital identity. And these massive platforms are the only entities capable of acquiring and utilizing it at scale.
Hmm.
Because we did the hard work of building our social networks for them, they own the marketplace.
So they have us trapped.
They do.
But back to the privilege aspect. If it is a privilege to leave because you don't rely on Facebook for your small business or whatever, isn't it kind of cruel to just abandon the people who are trapped?
The author argues the exact opposite, actually. Yes, being able to quit is a privilege. But if you have the latitude to quit, and you don't, you are not acting in solidarity with the less fortunate. You are simply reinforcing the monopsony that keeps everyone trapped.
Because the business model only follows attention and money.
Exactly. If you have options, you have power, and therefore you have a responsibility. Quitting is the only way to inflict enough financial pressure on Silicon Valley to force them to invent a non-toxic replacement.
Hit them where it hurts.
If you just stay on the platform and complain about it, or wait for the companies to magically regulate themselves against their own financial interests, nothing will ever change. You have to create the empty space that forces innovation.
Let's bring this all together. The core takeaway from our deep dive today is a hard pill to swallow, but an essential one. You are not the customer of these platforms. Your incremental behavior change is the product being sold to the highest bidder.
And the machine is mathematically designed to make you anxious, addicted, and angry, simply because that is the most efficient way to turn a profit.
It requires a moment of genuine self-reflection from you, the listener. Take a step back and look at your own digital habits. How much of your daily routine, your shifting moods, or even your political outlook is genuinely yours?
And how much of it has been quietly, subtly shaped by an algorithm testing its boundaries, injecting random mutations into your feed just to see if it can make you react?
It all comes back to that cat and dog analogy we started with. The machine wants you to be a dog. It wants you predictable, trainable, responding to the whistles without thinking.
Would you have the choice to be a cat?
You absolutely have the prerogative to be unpredictable and autonomous. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over, building on everything we have explored today. Imagine if millions of people actually did it.
Just walk away.
If millions of people suddenly deleted their accounts and took their attention back from the bummer machine, it would leave a massive, gaping void of human time and energy. Think about all those hours previously spent doom scrolling or fighting with strangers in the sooty snow.
So much wasted time.
What new real-world communities, what physical hobbies, what local physical renaissances might emerge to fill that space? If you suddenly gained back 2 or 3 hours a day of pure, unmanipulated autonomy, what would you build with it?